Xi'an became Emperor Qianlong's favorite place. But within less than a century, this beautiful park that had taken so much wisdom, effort, and passion to build would be destroyed in a huge fire. How did it meet its doom? And why would a leading figure at court, Prince Chun, oppose its reconstruction 13 years later? For the answers to these questions, watch the 4th episode of Untold Stories from the Summer Palace.
The graceful building standing at the east end of the 17-arch bridge is the largest pavilion within the grounds of the Summer Palace. In view of its shape, it is also known as the Octagonal Pavilion. The building is supported by no fewer than 40 columns, 24 of them round and 16 square. The building's most impressive feature, however, is the pointed tip of its double eaves roof. Jingyi Yuan, the Garden of Clear Ripples as the Summer Palace was originally called, contained 40 pavilions, and each one, apart from contributing to the charm of the particular scene of which it was a part, offered a quiet place to rest. To the west of Le Shou Hall, or the Hall of Happiness and Longevity, is a small yard. Carved into the ground is a stone decoration in the shape of an unfolded fan. Its 8 ribs point in the direction of a building that itself resembles a fan. Its name is Shanmian, or Unfolded Fan Hall. Its shape makes it one of the most unusual buildings at the Summer Palace, as does its alternative name, Yang Ren Feng, Wind of Virtue. The story goes that at the time of the Jin dynasty, a man of letters named Yuan Hong, before he set out to take up an official position, was given a folding fan by his friend, the famous poet Xie An. Yuan Hong, aware of the gift's symbolism, said, "Trust me, I will promote benevolence and work for the good of the people." This pavilion was conceived as a memorial to this honest man and to remind visitors of their moral obligations. Every structure in the garden was designed as an integral part of a scene. All the elements, including light shining on water and mist and clouds above, worked together for a single objective: to highlight the beauty of the place, whatever the season and whatever the time of day. Emperor Qianlong's visits to this vast and exquisite garden often inspired him to create works of literature. In his lifetime, Emperor Qianlong wrote a total of 42,000 poems. 1,500 of them were eulogies to Qingyi Yuan. He also enjoyed literary improvisations with his ministers. They came up with lines of poetry to echo his own, reveling in the moment. Level ground, fascinating garden, stretching mountain slopes around a mirror-like lake shaded on all sides by trees. Are these buildings man-made or gifts from heaven? It is hard to tell. This poem is in fact a translation from the Tibetan. The original was written by the famous Tibetan scholar, the third Thukwan living Buddha, Choski Nyima. Summoned by Emperor Qianlong, at the age of 27, Choski Nyima set off for Beijing. He arrived a year later in 1763, by which time Qingyi Yuan was complete. As the imperial advisor on Tibetan Buddhism, he spent many hours with Emperor Qianlong in this garden. He is believed to have composed the poem Level Ground, Fascinating Garden, possibly at the urging of the emperor. The Qing government had established administrative systems in both Tibet and Mongolia by this time. This meant there were quite a number of religious scholars from these regions at court. Finding in the emperor an amiable man, they referred to him as Bodhisattva. The emperor liked this and even adopted the title Manjushri. In the 45th year of his reign, Emperor Qianlong turned 70. To celebrate the occasion, a massive boat made of stone, some 40 meters in length, was built on Lake Kunming. It was popularly known as the Marble Boat, although it was sometimes referred to as the Happiness Dragon Boat. On the third day of the 9th lunar month that year, the emperor instructed that everything be made ready for the arrival of a distinguished guest. The 6th Panchen Ardani would be arriving from Tibet, the first Panchen Lama to come to Beijing. On the day of his arrival, the 6th Panchen Ardani boarded a dragon boat at Xiaoyi Bridge in Qingyi Yuan. He was to burn joss sticks at Daobao An Temple, the temple of repaying kindness. Every imperial garden at the time had temples, but none could match Qingyi Yuan in terms of number. Inside Qingyi Yuan, there were 15,120 Buddhist and Taoist images. Every morning and every evening, incense smoke could be seen curling up to the heavens, accompanied by loud drumming and the tolling of temple bells. Zhihui Hai, the Sea of Wisdom Temple, is the tallest building on the front slope of Longevity Hill. Its outside walls are glazed with sumptuously coloured tiles, and its interior is formed into an arch using rocks. Not a single pillar or beam is to be found. For this reason, it is also called the Beamless Hall. On the hill's rear slope is a Tibetan Buddhist-style structure that took its name from the Buddhist concept of the Katur Dvipa. According to Buddhist teachings, the Buddha lives on the central mountain of Sumeru in the middle of a sea dotted with 4 large inhabited continents and 8 smaller continents. The design of this building complex reflects this belief. Each of the 4 large continents is accompanied by 2 smaller ones. At each cardinal point there is a stupa. They are all different colors, and each has 13 wheels on its body, standing for the 13 levels of heaven in Buddhism. On each side, east and west, there is a hall. One stands on a round rock symbolizing the sun, and the other is on a moon-shaped base. The overall depiction is of the 2 celestial bodies orbiting the Buddha. In the middle of the 4 continents is a tower modelled on the famous Samye Lama temple in Tibet. This tower stands for Sumeru, the place where the Buddha dwelled. One of the secrets to the prosperity of Qing China under Emperor Qianlong was the coexistence of various religions, which brought peace and territorial integrity to the country and unity to the people. According to historical records, Emperor Qianlong came to Qingyi Yuan on as many as 132 occasions to enjoy the scenery and to pray. On each occasion, he never failed to climb to the top of Longevity Hill to take in the view. The garden covered more than 300 hectares, 3/4 of it was water. The view from the front part of the hill, which took in the lake and hill, had at its heart Yan Shou Temple and the Pavilion of Buddhist Fragrance. The individual scenes in Qingyi Yuan, by blending with their surroundings, embodied a key principle of classical Chinese landscaping. But to Emperor Qianlong, this was much more than a garden. It was a place where he could contemplate the governance of the country. The garden contained copies of the most famous scenic views from all across the nation. Thus, it symbolized the vast territory and multitude of environments in the emperor's domain. The image of men farming in the fields while the women weave at home highlighted his efforts to develop the economy. The recreation of a market street typical of southern China symbolized national unity, cultural coexistence, the promotion of traditional values, and social stability. The garden exemplified Emperor Qianlong's political ideals. Guang Ruin Temple, the temple of praying for rain on Nanhu Island, was visited frequently by the emperor when he wanted to pray for good weather. In the 4th lunar month of the year 1795, the 60th and final year of his reign, Emperor Qianlong prayed in this temple for the last time. That night, after a long dry spell, the rain came. The next day, Emperor Qianlong hurried to the temple to offer his thanks to the Dragon King, the god believed to be responsible for rainfall. He then had the temple's name changed to God Sent Rainfall. While in China an emperor prayed for rain, in the West an industrial revolution was taking place. In many jobs, men were being replaced by machines. In the 5th lunar month of the 17th year of his reign, Emperor Jia Qing, Qianlong's son, issued a decree after his prayers had been repeatedly answered, that in spring and autumn every year, ministers would visit Guangruan Temple on his behalf. The year was 1812, when in the West, machines powered by steam were already in widespread use, and steamships were plying the seas. In 1860, on the 27th day of the second lunar month of the 10th year of his reign, Emperor Xianfeng, Qianlong's great-grandson, visited the same temple also to give thanks. But this was the time of the Second Opium War, and a combined British-French Navy was approaching China's north coast. This was the last time a Qing emperor was seen in this magnificent garden. Within a few months, the garden had been destroyed by fire.
1860年，英法联军造火烧掉了三山五园，颐和园的前身清漪园也在那场大火中被付之一炬了。请大家看这儿，这棵古树上至今还残留着当时的烧痕。
By 2 o'clock in the afternoon of October the 18th, 1860, Qingyi Yuan was a sea of flames. The fire had been deliberately started by the British and French army with the intention of forcing the Qing government to sign an unequal treaty. Charles Waggaman was a reporter accompanying the British forces. He wrote, "Most eye-catching was the tower standing above the garden. It became a torch burning fiercely on a granite stand, like something in a sacrificial ceremony." Another reporter recorded the scene in photographs. After the fire, the pavilion of Buddhist fragrance was gone, leaving the Sea of Wisdom Temple behind it in full view. Yanshou Temple, which had stood in front of the pavilion, had also vanished, as had all the buildings on the east side of the hill. In the Katur Dvipa, the 4 inhabited continents of the universe, all the wooden structures had been razed to the ground. Waggaman ended his account with these words: "In this war zone, nothing was left except for indestructible granite rocks, which cried out about their glorious past as a magnificent imperial garden." But this fate did not befall Qingyi Yuan alone. Not one of the 5 imperial gardens in Beijing's western suburbs was left unscathed. 6 days after the destruction of these man-made marvels, the Convention of Peking was signed. Britain and France were each promised 8 million taels of silver as so-called war reparations. In addition, Kowloon and the new territories in Hong Kong were ceded to Britain. While the treaty was being signed, black smoke from the burned pine and cedar trees still lingered above the northwestern suburbs of Beijing. The garden was gone, and gone too were the dreams, the wisdom, and the passion brought forth by Emperor Qianlong a century before. 26 years passed. Then one day in 1886, two men came to inspect the ruins. One of them was Lei Ting-chang, who came from a family of engineers who had worked on imperial projects for many generations. Lei Ting-chang's family had been closely involved in the construction of the summer resort in Chengde, Yuan Mingyuan, Changchuan Garden, the Garden of Eternal Spring, the Forbidden City and the Temple of Heaven, and even Qingyi Yuan itself. From the moment he stepped among the ruins, Lei Ting-chang's fate would be forever intertwined with that of the garden. Lei Ting-chang had come at the behest of Prince Chuan. The prince was the younger brother of the former Emperor Xianfeng, the brother-in-law of Empress Dowager Cixi, and, most significantly, the father of the incumbent Emperor Guangxu. When the garden had been set on fire in 1860, Prince Chuan was taking refuge in Chengde with the Emperor Xianfeng. But now, as a favourite of the Empress Dowager, he was a key figure at court. The Qing rulers came originally from the northeast of the country, where the weather was much cooler. They found Beijing's hot, dry summers particularly disagreeable. For this reason, soon after coming to power, they began to build gardens. Located in Beijing's northwestern suburbs, these summer resorts became symbols of a peaceful country and stable society. Later, however, the reconstruction of these gardens would become a symbol of lasting discord. In 1873, 13 years after the destruction of the 5 imperial gardens, the matter of rebuilding them was raised for the first time. Emperor Tongzhi, who had only recently acceded to the throne, ordered that the reconstruction begin with Yuan Mingyuan. However, the entire court realized that this was really the wish of Empress Dowager Cixi, the power behind the throne, and the emperor's order prompted a debate. Prince Gong and Prince Chuan argued that the country was weak and that the proposed reconstruction would be too costly and therefore unpopular. Prince Chuan then went to the emperor in tears to plead his case, and the emperor gave in. Another 13 years passed. In 1886, however, the issue of rebuilding the gardens was brought up again, and this time Prince Chuan supported the idea. What exactly had caused his dramatic change of heart? 13 years earlier, not long after having given in to the opponents of the reconstruction project, Emperor Tongzhi had died. That evening, an edict was issued that 4-year-old Aisinjiu Rosatian, Prince Chuan's son, would ascend to the throne as Emperor Guangxu. Perhaps Prince Chuan changed his mind for the sake of his son, or perhaps he was influenced by the Empress Dowager. Today, we have no way of knowing for certain, but history does tell us that the prince's first reaction to the news of his son's elevation was to decline by wailing and weeping until he lost consciousness. Perhaps Prince Chuan had some notion of the perilous future that lay ahead of his young son. sooner had his son become emperor than Prince Chun quit public life, hoping to see out his remaining days in seclusion.
Prince Chun found himself having to raise the money to rebuild Qingyi Yuan, the Garden of Clear Ripples. What was the link between the garden and the country's fledgling more powerful navy? The garden would eventually be given a new name, the Summer Palace. But why had it been necessary to keep the rebuilding work a secret? Stay with us for the 5th episode in our series, Untold Stories from the Summer Palace.